Good morning. It's time to get in touch. In Touch is a public affairs show dedicated to improving the lives of Susquehanna Valley residents. I'm Freddi Hammer, news director at Backyard Broadcasting.
Sustainability is a buzzword nowadays, and those who have embraced a lifestyle of renewal and recycling are ahead of the game, almost pioneering a culture of making good choices as we buy goods and services that we need. And at this time, an attitude of sustainability is a good way to save money and live prudently, and it's a good practice to get into the habit before we have to change. Raw materials and industry changes might force our hand. So to maybe get us in the mood for reusing and recycling, we have a chance to head to the Pajama Factory area right in the former hub of Williamsport's rubber and silk industries. And this is a great weekend for the Central Pennsylvania Vintage Fest, all coordinated by a couple of my coworkers, Tom Scott, Lonnie Wilcox, in the studio today for In Touch. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello. Hi, Freddi.
Hi, you guys. Now, Vintage Fest is just an opportunity for you guys to bring some excellent folks with some sustainability thoughts into our midst. What brought this about, Tom?
That's right. Well, Lonnie and I, my wife, friends of ours, we all collect. We're into vintage, everything from clothing to home decor.
Okay.
And we have a lot of friends that do the same thing. And this is something that happens all over the place.
Sure.
There are shows in Harrisburg and York and Lancaster and Philadelphia and Baltimore and, everywhere. And there are people that, sell
have this attitude.
Yeah, they sell and they have consignment shops and they live the lifestyle from wearing vintage clothing to decorating their homes with vintage items. And it's a big deal as far as how we are as consumers using up so much stuff.
Yes.
So we kind of got into this idea because it's what we enjoy and what our friends enjoy. And we said, hey, let's do this. And so that's where Central PA Vintage Fest came from. But doing the research, we toss 92 million tons of clothing away in landfills every year.
That's an amazing amount.
It's a crazy amount of numbers.
And that's what's making the mountain down in Montgomery.
Yeah. And it's each individual, you go, oh, hey, I'm going to clean out my closet. I'm going to get rid of this stuff. I'm going to donate. I'm going to do whatever. Well, at the end of the day, a lot of that ends up, more than 80 pounds of stuff from individuals every year. So it's a lot. And that's just, clothing. So there's an organization called earth.org, and the fast fashion brands, the things you can go into just about any chain store, box store and buy.
On clearance for $4.
Right, exactly right. And they're made of plastic. Even though those things are going on, that production has doubled since 2000.
Unbelievable.
So, yeah.
You're talking about the different industries as well around the world that could be bringing about abuse or child labor, all kinds of things also.
Sure, there's all kinds of, it's cheaply made.
Disposable, more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Lonnie, you also, as far as Tom talking about the clothing aspect of things, you have more of an aspect of collecting items that have come from bygone days, do you not? Also, probably a little bike experience in there, too, don't you, Lonnie?
Yeah, I guess it started with the superheroes and Star Wars back in the 70s for me. And then at some point, you get old enough, you forget those things. Your mom sells it for nickels at yard sales. You get a little older, you start wanting some of that stuff back. But
in their original packaging.
I'm good at spotting old packaging. Doing this with my mother for a long time.
Are you a flea market person, Lonnie? Or do you do more stuff online nowadays?
Got to do a little bit of everything now.
I guess so.
I like the thrill of going out and making trips around the neighborhood and trying to find the good things.
Tell me a little bit about collecting the lifestyle vintage clothes. What kind of people are going to be coming to this Central Pennsylvania Vintage Fest on March 23rd?
I think everybody who's into old things like to decorate man caves of their homes with things, and there's no better place to try to find it than here in a place where we're going to feature all that.
Sure.
And I think, the other thing is younger people, college students, high school students have gotten into thrifting. Now, I mean, the Central PA Vintage Fest is not going to be a thrift store. This is going to be the best of the best things that you can find. And, they've gotten into that. They've developed their own fashion. Everything from I see people that walk into vintage stores, dressed like it's the 1940s.
Yes.
And a lot of younger people now are, and sadly, the 90s and Y2K stuff is huge right now.
Okay.
And for a lot of us, that doesn't seem like that long ago.
What are you telling me, Tom?
Well, I'm saying, I think technically they say vintage is older than 19 years. So you do the math. So the early 2000s now is considered to be vintage. But there's certainly a lot of other people that are into things from the 60s and 70s and 80s. People our age, what they grew up with, what they wore, what they had in their homes, the kind of couch and sofa their parents had.
Neat.
It's a cool thing. So those are the kinds of people. And then just other people that are just interested in coming. Because in addition to, vintage vendors, we're going to have some, quality makers there too. We expanded into and added a maker's market with people that make jewelry and, all kinds of things like that. They repurpose fabrics into other items. It's a great area of interest for people. And for people who've been to the Pajama Factory for years, they've done a holiday market there. They know that that's in the Clear Story Ballroom and it's in the community room downstairs, and there's all kinds of vendors. So it's in those spaces, but it's going to lean strongly toward vintage items.
Tell me, it's two levels. So you have how many vendors that are going to be available to check their wares?
We have over 55 vendors. The bulk of them are vintage vendors, and then the quality makers I mentioned. We also have a couple people doing some sweet treats. We had a woman who said she makes vintage-inspired cookies. And we said, what in the world's that? And she makes cutout cookies that are highly decorated in the shapes of Pyrex bowls your mom may have had.
Oh, that's so cute.
Or television shows from the 60s and 70s.
Or like a Jell-O mold?
I don't know if there's a Jell-O mold, but
that's what I'm looking for.
I bet there will be people there selling Tupperware Jell-O molds from the 70s.
Oh, I bet so. I love that. And you talking about clothes and the kids. That's totally true. Teenagers nowadays wear, suits from the 50s that are tight and strange legs that, in my opinion, wow, I would have never worn that at their age, but it's the fashion now.
How we're going to dress today? Pick a time period.
That's
Yeah,
right.
really.
You get to pick. And you're right. They do that from the 40s, and they do, peg pants. There's people wearing, stirrup pants. Remember stirrup pants in the 80s?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
That was a big thing. And then the 90s and Y2K, they're wearing Jenko barrel leg jeans, the huge barrel leg jeans. I mean, those are a huge thing right now.
The only place you can find jodhpurs and a Keep on Truckin' t-shirt, it's all next weekend. Which is actually 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's going to be a big day with folks coming by.
Going to be a very big day, and we got to mention it's free admission to get in. Bring your friends. You know where the Pajama Factory is located in Williamsport. It's between Cemetery and Rose Street in the western end of Williamsport. Great thing. And the vintage aspect is kind of full circle with the building because the building has a history of, in fact, being a pajama factory. And even before that, they made sneakers there.
It was so neat. The Pajama Factory between 1883 and 1919 was the Lycoming Rubber Company.
Yeah.
And they actually found, did they patent the idea to put the fabric with the rubber? That's sort of what I think I read.
I think that was kind of the deal. And at one point, they were making Keds.
Yes, how exciting. And probably putting the footy pajamas into the pajamas.
I think you can still see the remains of some of the rubber company lettering on the side of the building.
Yeah. Did that really outdo the lumber stuff, I guess, or was it at the same time? I don't know.
No, I think, lumber was late 1800s. After post-Civil War, I think, is when that was. I'm not a history expert, but I believe that was the case. And I mean, that was positively huge, per capita. That's why it's millionaires. I mean, and then I think like a lot of towns this size, I mean, other manufacturing, which rubber and sneakers and pajamas and silk and all of that. I mean, that was big in a lot of towns this size. And I don't think it surpassed dollar-wise the lumber industry, but it certainly was a huge part of the economy in Lycoming County.
It'll get your feet wet when it comes to wanting to know a little bit more about the Williamsport history when you go to the Central PA Vintage Fest and see this beautiful building.
Yeah, the building's great.
What do they mean, Clear Story?
So Clear Story, it's not C-L-E-A-R, it's C-L-E-R-E, Clear Story, and it's an architectural window design. So the huge industrial windows, and then there's also a skylight down the center. It's a bright, white, high-ceiling industrial space with polished hardwood floors. It's close to 6,000 square feet if you haven't been there for anything, and it's gorgeous. And it filled up so quickly with vintage vendors, and we had so many other people being interested. The additional space is the community room, which you enter on the large brick smokestack side of the building there. It's on the Cemetery Street side of the Pajama Factory. You go in there, and that room's a bit smaller, but there's a small stage there, and it's a great space. They do dancing, they do music events there, and they also use that for the holiday market. And it's another great space, and it's joined by the courtyard in between, and people that have been in are familiar with it. And if you haven't been there to see all the great spaces and all the things that are happening, it's a great community at the Pajama Factory with artisans and other folks.
Lots of great stuff going on up there.
Yeah, all the time. And, I think the vision that Mark has for the building and how it's going to progress, he's the owner, and it's really getting there. And, again, something that is happening in a lot of cities the size of Williamsport with spaces that were not used for a long time, and now they're finding purpose not only every day of the week, but then for special events like the Central PA Vintage Fest.
I think it's really going to get us over to the Tabor Museum to get us all ready for it. To
Do
find
the research. Do the research.
So I think this is a really exciting opportunity to kind of just sort of get yourself vintage clothing, or maybe get a new style, or find some cool stuff for your home. I mean, it's from everything from clothing to decor to probably to food, like you said.
I tried to kind of do a list. I mean, there's vintage clothing, obviously, from the eras. You probably can find things there, probably from the 20s to Y2K. Vintage accessories, purses, shoes, hats, a big deal. Ties, gloves. There's T-shirts, concert T-shirts, and crazy sayings from the 70s and 80s. All the T-shirts you remember people wearing. Those are a big deal. Snapback
like the rainbow.
hats.
Remember the rainbow that was like you wore one half and your friend wore the other? I want a shirt like that.
But there's home decor and retro kitsch. If your grandma had little ashtrays that were squirrels holding, a half-open nut that was the ashtray part. I mean, that's the kind of thing. And goofy, barware is a big thing.
Yeah.
People are into, Mad Men, brought about how many people enjoyed barware and things like that.
I love the glassware that glows, like the things that have the uranium stuff. Yeah,
uranium glass and Vaseline glass. We have one vendor specifically coming that specializes in that kind of thing.
Cool.
So that's going to be neat. But then there's people like Lonnie, vintage toys, collectibles, other stuff.
Do you have anything in the boxes?
A few things. That stuff's tough to find.
Sure. Big
money stuff.
But you got the eye for it. I'm impressed by that. So you definitely have the
I'm
collection.
always looking in all the cracks and corners and above and behind.
Just like the folks that are coming to see you.
We have a vintage comic book guy that's going to be here. We have another guy that specializes in vintage books and magazines, horror and fantasy. And Lonnie mentioned vintage vinyl. A couple people there with some vintage vinyl. I mean, that's a big deal for people. Sure. Vinyl's making a huge comeback. And people are going back and finding other things.
I just bought myself a record player, so I'll be looking through the records as well. Coming up here on March 23rd, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Do you expect it to be packed early and maybe move out some of the inventory early? Do we get there early to get our best choices?
I think with any event like this, I know I do. If it's somewhere where they're selling vintage, I try to get there as early as possible because, you'd be the number of people that are into it. You go to an estate sale here, you got to get there early or you're in a line. We discovered in this process, not only do we have, vendors coming from Bloomsburg and Lock Haven and State College and Carlisle and Harrisburg and Lancaster and those areas, York, we found people that are here that are sellers. They're buyers and sellers online, and they might not have a brick and mortar store, but they're buying and selling vintage all the time.
Sure.
And we have vendors from the Williamsport area that are going to be there that don't always have a place to be, but are always selling vintage. So I would say, sure, get there early if you're looking for the good stuff, but it's a 7-hour event, 10 to 5. We're going to be there all day long. They're going to be selling all day long. So I would say come early. And then, for vendors that may want to be a little more lenient and not take things home at the end of the day, maybe prices toward the end of the day in some cases could be better. So it's a day-long event. I'd say take advantage of all of it.
Follow your gut.
Yeah, that's right.
It's an experiment. We're hoping and I'm pretty sure it's going to go well, but we hope to do it twice, maybe again in the fall.
Yep. That was one of my questions. Like, judging from how you've gone so far with the signing up and working with vendors, do you see a future second annual or biannual?
I think so. I think the setup, the interest, the vendors, they're all there. Certainly enough to do it again. Saturday the 23rd is going to determine if the people are interested, if they're coming, if they're buying, then we're absolutely going to do it again. And I'm pretty sure we will.
We made the announcement on Facebook, and within 2 weeks, we basically were full. Had to get the other room.
Right.
But our Facebook page just reached, 3,000?
3,000 interest, yeah. 3,000 interest, yeah. And we have an Instagram page. I just mentioned that. You can find Central PA Vintage Fest on Facebook. You can follow it. There's an event there for this that has more information. And there's also an Instagram page, Central PA Vintage Fest on Instagram. You can follow there, and kind of our habit through the process has been every day we're trying to announce a new vendor and feature a new vendor on those pages.
Well, that's neat. What road is Pajama Factory on? Like, how do we get there?
If you search the Pajama Factory, Park Avenue is the address. Mm-hmm. But that is the north side of the building, and it's between Rose and Cemetery Street.
Okay. And so that's where the chimney stack is that we should be parking
The chimney stack is on the Cemetery Street side, and that is the first floor entrance into the community room. And then on the Rose Street side, there are stairs that go up to clear story. And also back on the Cemetery Street side, there is a regular elevator. It makes it accessible to get up to the clear story from the opposite side of the building.
Each of you are going to have your vending spots. Are you going to have time to shop?
Geez, I hope so. But we'll be there early, or we'll be there the night before. We'll be there that morning helping people set up.
But we both will be selling. My wife does vintage clothing, and we do all kinds of other little things.
Well, I love your whole logo, Central PA Vintage Fest. It kind of reminds me of the Jetsons. Give me that feeling, from the 1950s, like how our linoleum and, stuff like that looked in the kitchen back then when it was avocado green.
That is Lonnie's work. He does good work.
Nice job,
Thank
Lonnie.
you. Yeah. Style of the period and, vintage everything, really. Records, comic books, you name it.
Come on out to the Central PA Vintage Fest. Saturday at 10 a.m. is when it's going to start, right there at the Clear Story at the Pajama Factory. Good luck, you guys. Good job putting this together and getting ready.
Come do something sustainable.
All right, we'll see you out at the Central PA Vintage Fest. Still on Facebook. You can check it out throughout this week. And
Absolutely. Free admission.
Tom Scott, Lonnie Wilcox, thanks for being on In Touch today, you guys.
Thanks, Freddie. We hope to see everyone there.
In Touch is locally produced in our studios at 1685 4 Mile Drive in Williamsport. To get in touch with us regarding questions, comments, or topic ideas, call weekdays between 8 and 5, 570-323-8200. You can also write to us at 1685 4 Mile Drive, Williamsport, PA 17701. Attention Freddi Hammer. Or email me at fhammer@backyardbroadcasting.com. For archived programs of our In Touch series, you can download and subscribe to our new Backyard Podcasting feature through a link on any Backyard Broadcasting website or obtained where podcasts are available. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, Backyard Broadcasting. The programming discussed here on In Touch does not necessarily reflect the feelings or opinions of the management or staff. Thanks for listening to In Touch, a production of Backyard Broadcasting.